I love the liberation, but structure was hard for me. And through this work, I started calling myself a structured improvisationalist. Because if I was going to make any advances, both were going to be elevated simultaneously, right? So Keith, I'd remind myself, I'm a structured improvisationalist. I need this structure. If I want creative adaptations and some improv, like we have to match that with structure, the minimal structure. So the discipline of creating this work is about those minimal structures. And my work personally is to remind myself that I'm a structured improvisationalist.
Hello, and welcome to Stories Lived, Stories Told, a dialogue-driven podcast exploring how to create better social worlds through better communication. I'm Abbie, and today I invite you to join me in conversation with Keith McCandless as we take a communication perspective on liberating structures. To take a communication perspective is to consider what we are making and how we are making it through our communication practices. It means seeing ourselves as active participants with choices about how we show up to each other. It is paying attention to patterns, context, stories, and relationships to better understand how meaning gets made. And it is embodying curiosity, mindfulness, collaboration, and dialogue to co-create better social worlds. So, whether the topic of today's conversation is familiar to you or not, the idea is that by looking at communication instead of through it, in this conversation and in all that we do, we expand our collective imagination through both storytelling and story hearing, revealing new ways of seeing and being for all of us. At the top of the episode, you heard our conversation partner today, Keith McCandless. Keith is one of the co-creators of Liberating Structures, which is what this whole conversation is about today. Something that I would have you listen for in this conversation is this idea of what we'll eventually get to when we practice the liberating structure of wicked questions, of tension, of duality, of complexity, of the coexistence of multiple stories, truths, realities, even when they seem conflicting. It's really challenging to hold space for that in our minds and our hearts, in theory and in practice, but I think that this is the invitation at the core of this conversation, at the core of so much of my work, and at the core of Keith's work with liberating structures. So with all of that in mind, let's begin the conversation with Keith. Hi, Keith. Thanks so much for joining me for this episode.
Delighted to be here, Abbie.
I'm really, really looking forward to speaking with you because I think I have a lot to learn from you. And I think that our two worlds have a lot of overlap and a lot to learn from each other if we bring them together. So hopefully we can be the start or the continuation of that, in the larger context of our, communities of practice. Before we dive too deep into liberating structures and your work with that and experiencing a liberating structure today, I always like to start off with the question of how are we arriving as a way to set our context at whatever level you want to speak to. If you are thinking, it's a beautiful day outside, I went on a walk, your day, your week, your year, the world, your community, there's a lot of different layers of context we could speak to. Something that's on my mind is, I guess this is getting us into the topic already.
Okay, I'm getting worried. Not really.
I just think that the idea of a liberating structure sounds contradictory to me. And that maybe speaks to my kind of natural tendencies or what I felt like I was more raised to do and think and how to be in the world, which I live in a world that is very much driven by productivity and efficiency. Capitalism is one of the structures that we both live under in the United States. And I think that got really internalized. And so I was kind of hyper clinging to structures and plans and control and trying to know things. And so the idea of a liberating structure is really, really interesting to me. So I'm just really excited about learning the story of how that emerged for you, because I see myself on my own journey of being like a recovering controller or planner or, overly structured person. And that's just me. And so I'm always curious to know where other people are at on their journeys. Do some of these things that I'm trying to work on, do they come more easily to other people? How so? Like what made you that way, and what continues to help you grow? So I'm just always interested to meet people on their own paths of finding, necessarily, I think, the balance. There's so many themes in my life where I'm realizing it's not one extreme or the other. There's a middle road of finding sometimes structures are useful, sometimes plans, sometimes you need to know what's going on and be in control, and also where can you let go. And for me, that really comes up in this idea of like, I think I taught myself over time, oh, if I stress about something, if I really worry about something, if I work really hard, then I'll get a good outcome. And so I'm trying to reteach myself, if I let go, if I lean into the emergence, to the mystery of an interaction, a conversation, a project, can I, find a peaceful way through to an outcome rather than a stressful way. So I'm bringing a lot of like personal curiosity, I think, around this topic. And of course, there's more to say, at least an hour's worth that we're going to get into today, probably more, but I'll pause for there just to catch my breath and turn it over to you to ask what you might be arriving with today.
Great. Well, we may have been separated at birth. I'm not sure because I'm like you, the desire for control. There's no limit to it.
Mm,
But more than control, it's desire for positive outcomes,
mm,
regenerative growth, developmental possibilities. So I am
yeah.
very hungry for that. I'm ambitious about it. And if I could control people to do that, that'd be great. But it doesn't work. Abbie, it doesn't work. We really have to let go of that. It's
I
so,
know, I've got to get it in
so
my head.
and Henry and I, co-author and co-developer, we both used to talk about, if that was just available in a bottle, we would be drinking it nonstop.
Yeah.
And we really had to be there for each other
Mm,
to stop the bad habits. So, for example, he'd come up behind me. This is a fond memory, believe it or not. I'd be going on about complexity science or some concept before we were about to use a liberating structure. Something simple like impromptu networking, quick rounds where you share what you're working on and what you can contribute. And he had to come up behind me, grab me from behind, and squeeze me until I stopped talking. Right, and say, Keith, we talked about this, and everybody would go, and we'd be in some place where it mattered. Decorum made a difference, like
huh.
Paris, somewhere in a corporate setting where, pinkies up or,
Uh,
it was like, and we acted out that dynamic multiple times. He needed it as much as I did.
mm-hmm.
We wanted things to be a certain way, and we'd been trained within an inch of our lives to use planning and control methods. We can
Right.
predict what'll happen. We'll do all the work in advance, and then it'll. So I'm bringing that to this conversation for sure, like you, and just published a book. There, I'm going to put it on camera for a second. There it is, and a website, and It's an update, but it's not like on your phone where you get one
Mm-hmm.
every couple weeks. This
Yeah.
took 12 years since there was a first book and an app, and all these other things have been updated. So I'm maybe a bit overwhelmed with a double launch
Mm-hmm.
of the excitement that comes with that, and the excitement. On the last thing I want to say, the excitement comes from what people do to creatively adapt the work in their setting.
Mm-hmm.
So it could be a classroom, a boardroom, any part of the world. The work has already spread all over in every domain. And so it's exciting. And that's what I'm bringing to this conversation. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for sharing that. And it gives me a really nice springboard into asking to introduce yourself a little further to name, maybe we're catching you at the really perfect time because with this update, I imagine you're in a very reflective state about what the last 12 years of this work have been, what the however many years before that were. And so I'm curious, as you introduce yourself, I imagine you'll maybe in tandem start introducing the idea of liberating structures, making an assumption here that, maybe who you are and how you think of yourself is intertwined with this work. But I just want to leave it wide open to say, if I say, go back to the beginning and what's your story? Like who are you now? And what led you to this moment in your life? I'm just curious of any of those different ways of, me asking you to introduce yourself, if any of them are ones you want to pick up and choose.
Well, I'm very enthralled with the scholarly basis for your work. So I think I'm going to go there to
Great.
describe a little bit. So even in high school, I was excited by ideas about a more civil society and wanted an internship I did with a city council was one about the police walking again in the community, walking in the neighborhoods, and trying to make a transition from we're mostly in our cars
Mm,
and doing police work outside of the community to one in which they were a part of it. So early on, I was interested in the social dimensions and how do you make transitions? Super
mm-hmm.
interested in that. And then I got interested in alternative schools and went to an interdisciplinary experiment in learning called the Evergreen State College. And everything was taught with multiple faculties. There was a sociologist, a
Mm,
literary scholar, a urban planner, and so forth and so on. And we took on big topics from multiple dimensions like that.
mm,
And so that the work that I'll describe uh, carried on with those early inclinations for things. And my earliest positions were related to strategic planning. And so this is the epitome of we're going to make a plan and
oh
then
yeah.
control. We're going to get to that stuff. And so I tried everything, Abbie. I tried everything. And I had jobs where I was the founder of a learning and education foundation in healthcare. I was the director of learning and systems thinking for a think tank in San Francisco. I had all sorts of positions where I had a budget and my imagination to create learning groups to explore how do you shape the future.
Mm,
But it started with, traditional strategic planning kind of things. And then there was a progression to things like scenario planning, where you don't really know what environment you're going to work in. And then idealized design,
mm,
Russ Akoff and some other people who were thinking, well, you can kind of imagine and then chunk your way toward a future. And eventually, I tried a bunch of those things with real groups, real healthcare organizations, real businesses, and was very dissatisfied
mm-hmm.
with the results. That they weren't uh, never got to where it never really reached ground. It never really got
Mm-hmm.
worked into the fabric of any organization. And then I bumped into complexity science, and so this was after all these other methodologies like or theories, let's say, systems thinking, idealized design, um, design thinking. And so my entire history is working through these wonderful disciplines, really. And then complexity science messed it up. It totally turned me upside down.
Yep.
And at the time, I didn't have the benefit of many of the scholars, the sociologists, and I mean, there was a little hint of social
Mm-hmm.
constructionists, and a little bit of reading about that. But uh, I met some people who were also interested in complexity science. We formed a different couple organizations, but the most formal was called the Plexus Institute. And it was made up of mathematicians, physicists, physiologists, uh, every kind of scientific discipline, and a few people interested in organizational work and management or organizational design. And for those small number of people in this larger scientific community, everybody was trying to make practical use of complexity science. So how does a butterfly wing,
Yeah.
how's a fractal pattern form? What's sensitivity to initial conditions? Why does it matter how you start something, that it influences the next thing? There were a few people who were practical in that group. I met them, and one in particular, Henry, as a collaborator, who wanted to work in organizations and see if the hypothesis or hunch that we had, that the natural phenomena of how
Mm-hmm.
ants organize an anthill, and how slime mold transitions from one shape to another,
Uh-huh.
and how does the heart, how do the patterns behind systole and diastole in a heart pattern, uh, how do they shape and evolve and either develop problems or get healthy again? And so all of those questions, after years, like 5 years of listening to all the scientists do that work, Henry and I became more confident that we could begin experimenting with this hunch that these very same ideas
Mm-hmm.
apply to human organizing. And that began a series of experiments where we entered into healthcare systems, entered into big business organizations, and started to develop a repertoire. First, just a handful, and then 15 or 20. And we had little workbooks that, got translated into Spanish and
Mm-hmm.
Italian and French. And, wherever we were in the process of uh, making these little learning guides. And at some point, the clients just said, you've got to write, you've got to write a book, you've got to write it all down. These little workbooks don't cut it. And we were kind of shamed into trying to pull it together,
Uh-huh.
right? And so there's, uh, and they encouraged us because the stuff we were doing was incredibly useful to them as
Uh-huh.
individuals, as the groups they were in, their families, their businesses, their societies, some of the, uh, at multiple embedded levels, the work immediately was practical for them.
Mm-hmm.
And we're like, we didn't even know like what was happening. It was like, I want to tell one little story. Can I tell one
Please,
one
please.
right now? Okay. So the first glimpse of this, we were in Ohio in the United States, and a big health system. There were 80 or 90 people in a room. We are experimenting with a couple of these structures, which we'll get into what they are, but they featured dynamics that aren't typical. So one is there's relatively fast rounds of conversation, like a short burst, and then you switch groups and you're talking to some other people and you're gathering different perspectives. And then some of the highlights are kind of pulled into a tapestry or kaleidoscopic view of
Mm-hmm.
what's going on. And so we're in this thing where we're with this client, 90 people in the room, and they're kind of going back and forth. There's a fishbowl in the center, and they're talking about how to refer patients out and across the system. This was a big health system. And at one point, we thought it wasn't going very well. It wasn't very interesting. The conversation didn't seem deep.
Mm.
But it was raucous and they were, really having fun with it.
Mm-hmm.
But the CEO stood up in the middle of the group, threw up his hands like, oh my, that is, and just said out loud to the whole room, that is the best conversation we've ever had. Everything we just discussed
Wow.
is a final decision. And Henry and I looked at each other like, okay, it didn't seem like there were any decisions in there. It didn't seem like that great a conversation,
Mm-hmm.
but it was so different than anything they had done before. The normal thing is
Yeah.
uh, serial processing. Somebody talks and everybody listens, and then
Yeah. Yeah.
they ask questions or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But this was parallel processing. Everybody was talking about the
Mm-hmm.
same thing. And this crazy, raucous mix of ideas and meaning was being made
Yep.
at a level that they'd never experienced. So much so
Yeah.
that the boss was just lost control. And
Yes.
we were like, oh, we have to understand what happened. I mean, that's when the work got serious. We were doing some things that we didn't understand the dynamics that we were inviting.
Yeah.
Right. So, that was, I hope that's kind of like a beginning of where we got serious when the clients took the
Mm-hmm.
work and either took it more seriously than we were or took it to places, to applications that we never imagined.
Mm-hmm.
So that was 25 years ago when that first work started. And it took us 7 or 8 years of field work, maybe 9, to publish a book. And another 12 years went by where people have been doing cool things, and we published another book
Mm-hmm.
now. So that's a story about
Yes.
the trajectory.
Yeah, yeah. There's more I want to ask for sure about liberating structures, and I know that we will get into that, so I'll trust that and go with the thought I really want to follow for now, which is it seems to me like you really can't overstate the importance of that educational experiment that you got to be a part of during it was your college years, was this experiment basically? Is that right? College?
It was past that.
Okay, okay, it was
Yeah,
even later degree.
it
Okay.
was later. I'd done
Yeah.
a traditional management degree,
Okay.
which
I
I
didn't know
was
if this was
recovering
instead.
from. Yeah.
Got it. Yes, right. Exactly. Well, I just think that again, I feel like so many people I talk to, I want to be like, "Oh, you should be calling yourself a communication scholar, communication." It's everything is about communication. And I understand why people don't, and that wouldn't be helpful because we need to be maybe a little more descriptive. But when we see that everything is about communication, it really brings some things to our attention that we might be taking for granted or not paying attention to. And so, as you talk about this kind of learning that in the process is baked in this understanding that there are multiple perspectives and stories on what's being talked about, that is something that I have really come to appreciate as like an underdeveloped skill or process because listening and learning, being a student is such an important part of our communication. And I don't think yeah, people talk about active listening or deep listening, but people, I don't think, talk about listening with an understanding that there are multiple, if you have a teacher telling a student reading from a history textbook, say, this is what happened, then that student has maybe not been taught to hear this is one of many stories of what happened, many people's accounts of what happened, one of many ways of making meaning of what happened. And so that's been a question I've continued to come back to of like, how do people learn to listen in that way in their, as students and just in their everyday relationships? Because if you tell me a story that is about something you believe that maybe is different than what I believe, I think people are very tempted to be like, that's a threat to me. because you're saying this is how it is, rather than, if I could, like take a step back from myself from this conversation and see us in this larger context of many stories coexisting, what would that, I just wonder what that would do for us in terms of our communication and relationships, of how we would be able to hear each other.
Well, every liberating structure has a structure to help create listening,
Mm-hmm.
uh, helping, giving help, and getting help.
Mm.
So all of those can be relatively underdeveloped in our current world. So I want to describe how a typical uh, one, two, maybe at least two, maybe three liberating structures, how they work.
Yeah, great,
Because the
please.
structure part, the liberation is great.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody's gonna go with their arms up and go, all of that. Well, let's do that,
Yeah,
right?
that's liberation. That's the image of liberation.
That's really fun. And but the structure is different. You have to
Mm.
get to it. You have to build that into your
Yeah.
pattern of relating. So we call them
Yes, right.
patterns, and we're very clear that the simplest way to change results at all levels, personal, organizational, cultural, is to change the pattern of interacting. And we very specifically say, here are 43
Mm-hmm.
field tested, step by step things you can do. So a typical meeting for us, let's say we're in a classroom and we want to learn about how to work with customers or something mundane. Let's just say it's about how do you work with clients or customers. And so we'd start with the professor or host, we call people hosts, don't lecture about it at all. It's just what the theme today is, how do you work with clients? And we're going to start, uh, uh, you're going to have a few minutes with one person, and then you'll switch and you'll be with another person and a third person. And each time you're invited to talk about your experience with this, what your experience has been with customers, and what you hope to get from and give to this class. And you're going to have 5 minutes with that and try to share the time as best you can. Ding, or breakout room starts. And then really quickly at that 5 minute mark, you switch to a new person. And again, a third time. And what that does, the speed at which you're doing it, first of all, you've got to get your ideas out quickly. And just some of your screens and bias disappear because it's fast.
Mm-hmm.
And then you just starting to really like that person. And then you've got to switch again.
Yeah.
Oh, what's that about? Why would that be in the structure?
Uh-huh.
And then after the third round, we come back and the host, teacher invites, well, was there anything that just so important that came up in your 3 rounds that you need to share it with the larger group and put it in chat or say it out loud? And that does a few things, and you can imagine already what they are. But one is suddenly the context for working with this material, this how do you interact with clients, is your view is compared to these 3 other views. And now suddenly you're more curious. There's a wider range of context in which that's being considered. And most of what the faculty would be doing if they gave a lecture has already been covered in 15 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And it's coming right out of each person. And as they're, so also there's a social relating part to it. Like,
yeah.
Oh, these other people are they really have a different view, and they're kind of interesting too.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
They're more like me than they're not like me, but there's similarities and differences. And suddenly you have a social context alongside some content that's being developed,
Mm-hmm.
and you're being respected that your views, before somebody is laying it on you, uh, are a valid part of what you're going to do next. So now, after this, still don't go to the faculty and say, "Can you now you give a lecture about it?" No, never.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the next thing would be a troika consulting, and this is 3 people, and this is where the focus is a bit on how do you ask for help and give help,
Mm-hmm.
not just a little tricky, but in your group of 3, one person is going to have a chance to ask the other 2 for help on something you're challenged by in regard to this topic, which is working with clients. And you're going to have just a minute, and this is part of the structure. You're just going to have a minute to describe what the challenge is, and if you can, say what kind of help you're looking for. And then these 2 people have 1 minute, and these are all timed things, 1 minute to ask you any clarifying questions. And then you're invited to turn your back on those 2. And during the next 4 or 5 minutes, those 2 will have your back. They're going to do everything within their power to lovingly support you, lovingly provoke you, and lovingly support you in exploring what else is possible that they see that you might not see, or build on whatever you've asked for. And after that bit of helping that's provided, and they're behind you, and you're invited not to look back, not to give a thumbs up, just be present and listen. And that this is part of the structure. You turn back around, and you should see the look. For years, I just did photographs of people as their face turned around. It's the first time that anybody's ever supported. They really had my back.
Wow.
And then, okay, who's next? Now you repeat the process 3 times, and each person, typically, if it's the first time you've done this, you never forget who your troika partners were, because it's the first experience of being listened to and being helped without you. Like if I was trying to help you right now, and I saw your eyes just narrow a little bit, I would probably stop going down that path. You would definitely shape, and because your back is turned, there's all sorts of paths that are revealed that wouldn't be if you were face to face. So now, after one of these troika consults, each person does the thing, and then we also ask, because we want this structural awareness to be built. We ask, well, what was structured about that before we leave it? Let's spend a couple of minutes. What was structured? And they'll notice, like, well, I didn't have enough time to describe my thing. Well, did you get good, really solid advice? Yeah, I don't know. How did they do it? They were so intuitive. They just did a thing. And why did it turn back? I'll ask, like, why did it turn back? Well, it was so that you didn't get controlled by their responses, and the 2 people had generated a flow, a little 2-person flow, building off each other's ideas. And so, as we're introducing these things, we're also trying to build the awareness of what structure does in that situation. So still, the faculty is not given a lecture.
Yes.
And so the next thing would be a nice little conclusion. I'm making this up as I go, but I would do this. Okay, well, based on this impromptu networking, the first activity, you got a sense of context, you got some help on your thing you're working on. So now let's do 15% solutions. And this is another structure. And you're invited to think about, okay, given this challenge you have with things and everything you've heard, what do you have the freedom and discretion to do immediately? What action can you take now? Think about that for yourself, pair up with one other person, or you could go back to the same 2 people and share what you're thinking and ask them to expand on it. And here you've suddenly moved from I'm fully supported and I've got some ideas to, action, I can start to make progress on this challenge I'm facing. And maybe there's some reason, you'd hear a few of those 15% solutions from the class, however large it would be. And those could inspire others to rethink what they're doing. But
Mm-hmm.
basically, the faculty has done, or teacher or host has done zero lecturing. And
Mm-hmm.
that's probably the best class that this
Yeah.
group has ever been in. And they have a community, a learning community as a result. So, okay, I went on, but that would give you,
Yeah.
that's how it works.
Hey, it's Abbie here, taking a pause in this conversation to invite you to reflect with me about how this episode is hitting you so far. If you're wanting to learn more about the coordinated management of meaning theory that I reference in this conversation, I'd recommend checking out the CMM Institute Substack for additional educational resources. If you're loving what you're hearing and are curious to learn more about CMM in different contexts, use the link in the show notes to follow the CMM Institute event page, where you can stay up to date with our monthly webinars hosted by yours truly. These events are an opportunity to gather with our community and explore CMM in different ways. And if you're looking to be even more connected, you can peruse our other CMM Institute initiatives, like our free social emotional learning resources, Cosmo Activities, which feature ways to engage all ages in conversations about building better social worlds. Links to all of these can be found in the show notes. As we turn toward the second half of this episode, I invite you to reconnect with your body and your environment. As the music plays to take us back to the conversation, take a breath, sink into your body wherever you are, take in your surroundings, and settle in for some more stories. Let's get back into it. Yeah, I just listening to that story, it's very easy to see how an experience like that could be really, really transformative. And particularly from my world of things, what I've come to understand about communication is that the heart of so much of this is just a reminder, again, not to be taken for granted, that people actually remember that they have choices and how they communicate, because some of us have just done what we've done for so long without any opportunity or any kind of structure or feedback or opportunity to reflect on, like, could I do something different? Because sometimes it does not feel like you have a choice. And so it makes sense that putting a structure in place that actively is like, try this out, try something, like I mean, I have this image of like trying on clothes, like what do I like, what fits, what, how does this make me look, what does this do, is this my color, like try different things on, just see what happens. Or if you are a sports person, maybe like practicing. Or I was a more of a theater kid growing up, so like rehearsal, you do rehearsals
Uh-huh.
so then you
Yes.
can go perform, and you try things and you change things and you make adjustments. And so this idea that it seems like that's not to offer a huge oversimplification, but the point of these liberating structures is to try on something new. And as you already said, clearly, and should be said clearly, like that the process is these turn by turns. That's how things get made. And so if you set the intention, the structure for the purpose of liberation, then you're going to make something. And it just seems like your experience probably just like proves that to you over and over and over again.
It does, and I realize that uh, it seems like you need permission or something to get started with this work, or you
Hmm.
have to take a little risk on your own. It's your turn to try something different, and it just takes a little personal courage to
Yeah.
get it started, and what you're opening yourself up to, which is the exact opposite of planning what the result is and
Hmm.
having the strategy. It's you're preparing yourself to be wonderfully surprised by what's possible.
Hmm.
And because I've had a lot of practice with it, I'm quite confident. But you get that through practice. You get that
Yeah.
confidence through repeatedly being blown away by what a group can do without you trying to control.
Yeah.
The theme might be built in, the topic matter might be
Sure.
built in, but most of the rest of it, if you have a repertoire,
Hmm.
uh, you you can handle it. Particularly the most complex things, that the highest order goals that we hold dear.
Yeah.
This is where this kind of work is the most important, because people are actually trapped in, oh, we can't change, a big sigh. Oh,
Yeah.
we can't change that. And that's just, my experience is the opposite of that.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I wonder what more you could say in terms of how do these structures create liberation? Like, just what, maybe even like, I'm curious about where the name came from in your experiences, how you settled on that to describe these 43 different structures and processes. But like, what does it mean and what does that look like to just, again, continue down this path we're on? I think of like the shared hope here is to just help make it real for people.
well, there was a little bit of work in academic world's political writing about liberating structure, which wasn't what
Hmm.
we were thinking about really, although it has some of those elements. Um, but what our experience with it was, and my personal experience is that I love the liberation, but structure was hard for me. And through this work, I started calling myself a structured improvisationalist,
Hmm.
because if I was going to make any advances, both were going to be elevated simultaneously. Right. So, Keith, I'd remind myself, I'm a structured
Yeah,
improvisationalist.
yeah,
I need this structure.
yeah.
If I want creative adaptations and some improv, like we have to match that with structure, the minimal structure,
Yeah.
not a big process that, by the time you're in step 3, you don't even remember what you're doing. It has to be as simple as those things that I just described to you.
Mhm.
Like, okay, turn your back, here's a couple minutes, it's
Right,
just,
right.
so the discipline of creating this work is about those minimalist structures. And my work personally is to remind myself that I'm a structured improvisationalist, and that's how I'm going to move the work and me forward.
Hmm.
Yeah, does that help?
It
Or is that?
does. It
Yeah,
absolutely does. And it's, sticking with this theme of two seemingly contradictory things. I know that what we already talked about is the one liberating structure I'm really interested in experiencing with you today and learning more about is the wicked
right.
questions one, which is language I've heard before, but I don't know that everyone is familiar with that. And so I've done some reflecting as promised, and I'm curious if you could this is me leaning into emergence and
Cool.
handing over the reins of my podcast to you to say, can you guide us through wicked questions liberating structure in this moment? I know
Yeah.
there's just the two of us, so that is limiting, but let's see
No, no,
what
no.
can happen.
It'll work. So it starts with you reflecting, which you're really good at. I can see that. Um, on things that are just true about your work. They're
Hmm.
just those things are true. So if you want to just take for a minute, in the podcast, I know you can edit a little bit. So
Hmm.
take for a minute and jot, and this is an important part of the structure, is you jot a couple of things down. Jot 5 or 6 or 7 things down on a sheet of paper near you right now that are just true. True.
Uh-huh.
I know it breaks the pattern of, but it's part of the structure is that you've got to write them down. So have you done that, or can
I
you do
have
that?
already done that,
Oh,
yes.
you've done it. Okay. The pre-work. Well,
Yeah.
yeah,
I
okay. And
told you, planner at heart.
okay. Well, let's say I had done that too. And then the next step in this particular structure is to share what you have on your list. And together we'll look, both people would do it at the same time, but we'll look for things that are just so opposite from each
Hmm.
other. So how can that be true and this be true? So what are some of the items on your list?
I have, following our conversation already, but also other conversations I'm having in my work, emergent and strategic. I've got patient and urgent. I've got
Mhm.
loving and challenging. I've got hopeful and hopeless. I've got zoomed in and zoomed out. And I've got paying attention and peaceful.
Ah, okay. So you've reduced those to words.
Yeah.
So it's helpful, and we can still work with that, but it's
I can go
helpful
back
if
a
you,
step too if I'm
yeah,
ahead.
go back a step
Yeah,
because then
okay.
it gives a little more context.
Okay.
Eventually, a wicked question is going to have two, we're going to pick two words, but
Okay, yeah.
give a little more context on a couple of those. Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. I think I'll go with the hopeful, hopeless one because I find myself really overwhelmed by the current reality we find ourselves in terms of very large scale things that are happening in our world that I feel I have no direct control over. And so I
Mhm.
feel kind of hopeless. Maybe helpless is another word that fits right alongside hopeless, the sense of I'm just one person, but also I think I desire to be a hopeful person, and the work that I do is naturally very hopeful. Better communication, better social world. Like you have to believe in the better social world to think that any of this matters at all. Otherwise, you just drive yourself crazy, looking at each of these little turn by turn things that feel so minute in a very large world. And so I think that's a contradiction I have going in my life and in my work.
Okay, let's work with it. Let's work with it. So, and this is what you do in a pair when you're doing this activity. Same kind of thing, although you'd be helping me too. Um, so the structure, the grammar of a wicked question is how is it that I am or we are this thing while this other thing, right? So how is it that let's do one side of your maybe the helpless. How is it that I'm one person? I heard a bunch of things there. So how is
Yeah,
it that I'm alone? Finish one side of it. How is it that I am? Let's do the I version of this. How is it that I
I think helpless and helpless, feel helpless, am
feeling,
helpless.
yeah, yeah, feel helpless has as an individual? I'm just
Yeah.
trying to put enough there. Helpless
Yeah,
as
yeah,
an
yeah.
individual.
That
Uh,
there are ways that I literally, it's not even just feeling helpless, that I think that I am powerless because I'm not the president of there's things I literally don't have power to do. So
yeah.
that it is, a reality, not just a feeling.
Okay. So how is it that my influence over things is small and I feel helpless while this other thing, which is about your work and the power of uh, communication.
Hmm.
So fill in that side a little bit for me. Um,
Yeah.
wow.
While I also very deeply know that these small things do matter, that the paying attention to our communication, our relationships, and what's going on in my sphere of influence or my bubble, I do believe that it matters. And I feel it and I know it to matter. I
Yeah.
see it to matter.
Yeah. I'm going to go up a notch. So there's this one side almost like, how is it that this moment is full of despair
Yeah.
for me, while I've never been more confident uh, that communication is the uh, changing the pattern, or I don't, you've got such great language. I'm not going to do that, but something about how you work with communication,
Yeah.
while I've never been more confident that. this is how we'll work through.
Mm-hmm.
So I think your wicked question, and I want you to keep working on it. But it's something about how is it that in the face of despair in my own individual, the little things I can do, uh, while, so what I'm suggesting is you face the despair and also amplify your confidence,
Mm-hmm.
right? So try a sentence where you kind of put both of those things into it.
Not the how is it that I'm blank while
Well, no,
blank,
no. How
but
is it that I
okay.
am? How is it that as I am while those
Okay.
two? Just
Okay,
try a
yes,
couple
that fit.
sentences for me.
Yeah. How is it that I am powerless while simultaneously mattering? How is it that I am daunted while simultaneously influential?
Mm-hmm. Getting better. And when you get there, I'll go, it'll feel the real test of a wicked question is
Yeah.
once you've stated it, it's like, oh, that's it. You will
Yes.
do that, and I might too. So keep going. You could do a couple more.
Yeah. Okay.
And sorry, I'm putting you on the spot, but
I'm here. I want
asked
this.
for it.
Yes, yes, yes. This is good. I'm just trying to think.
Yes.
The daunted word is really interesting. That is getting me a
Yeah.
little bit towards the ugh, because that's part of I feel or let's see, there's another word. How is it that I am debilitated by the size of struggles
Hmm.
while simultaneously motivated into action?
Nice.
Is
That's
that
getting close. That's getting closer.
yeah, yeah. How
Yeah.
is it that I am paralyzed while simultaneously activated?
Really good. Now that's getting really close. Now activated,
Mm,
paralyzed, and activated. Now this is where the two words come in that
yeah,
make a big difference. And
yeah.
if you're going to make your wicked question public,
Uh-huh.
then it's good. Like mine, how is it that I'm more and more structured while wildly improvisational?
Yeah, yeah.
Right? That's pretty easy to say, but I've been working on mine for
Mhm.
30 years. Uh, so I can go there with you because I kind of have this. How is it that my despair over the current situation has never been more deeply felt, while my power to make a difference in the world is unmatched?
Mm-hmm.
Something
Mm-hmm.
like that, and then the thing with this, we give it enough time, and I'm looking at the clock a little bit, so I'm worried about that. But keep working on it, Abbie. Keep
Yeah.
working on it to get it to a place where it sings to you, and you can
Yeah.
go, ah. And when you're faced with the thing you're going to do next and you don't know what to do, that's your guide. It's the
Mm-hmm.
way you evaluate what you'll do next, what you evaluate, and you can judge what you did next.
Yeah.
Like, did I really hold I use despair just because it's part of my training to face, you got
Yeah.
to face the thing
Yeah.
first,
Yeah.
and then out of that comes some action.
Mm-hmm.
So don't do one or the other. You
Yeah.
want to do more of both. So it's okay to drop into despair, which is super hard. I
Yeah.
once did this session with a colleague, and we did some despair work, and I just couldn't talk for about an hour and a half. I couldn't speak, and he was like,
Mm-hmm.
Keith, what happened to you? I said, I can't even talk now.
Yeah.
I can't be a co-host of this session because I went in and I didn't know how to get out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. So when you're talking about this current situation, it's despairing. It can make you feel powerless. And that somehow that has to be a turn in you, uh, uh, help shape that into bolder or
Hmm.
just action. It's not bolder. It's just like, oh, well, I'm going to do something about that.
Yeah.
Um, so that's how Wicked Question works. And we've rushed it a little bit, but in
Sure.
the process, two people are supporting each other to get
Yeah.
at their thing. And it can be about topic matter too. It doesn't have to be about you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, like one that I use for the Liberating Structures community is how is it that we're able to imagine a whole world where there's a civil society and peace and love and all this
Hmm.
thing while we're terrified to change the order of
Hmm.
the next 60 minutes of a meeting?
Hmm.
Like, how can both? So I've got to address the fear over changing the rules, which is what
Yeah.
Liberating Structures kind of does. With this, our imaginative abilities, we can see this thing,
Right.
uh, and so that one relates to outside of me in my professional work.
Hmm.
I'm paying attention to both of those things all the time. Uh, that there's anxiety about changing the order of things.
Yeah.
Uh, and we more desperately need to do that than ever before. Uh,
Hmm.
so,
It's interesting the stories that come to mind for me as I think about this dichotomy, which is, or, false dichotomy, just the way we're setting it up as a binary, this and that. And I think the other language that's coming to mind, which I had written something like that here, that's a core of what I think I'm trying to say is this idea of like, how do I pay attention? How do I keep my eyes open to being a good citizen of the world where I'm paying attention to what's going on in the world? I think of my parents who at different points have been like, oh, we don't watch the news. We choose not to watch the news because it's so stressful. And I think that is a choice that many people have made and is like a luxury that feels like we can't afford anymore. And so I know I want to protect my peace, but I also want to pay attention. And so that's maybe like what I was speaking to earlier of that like paralyzing, activating is like how I feel about the thing. When I pay attention, sometimes I feel that paralyzed experience that you're talking about where I'm like Eeyore. I'm just instantly like, oh my God, I can't. How
yeah,
can I change topics and talk about anything else when this is a reality in the world?
yeah. Well, look what
And
we're doing right now. Yeah, we're talking
yes,
about, yeah. How are we doing
yes,
this? It's
yeah.
impossible.
That's how it feels. Yeah. And so
Well,
paying attention, being a good steward, a good citizen, and also protecting my personal peace
yeah.
so that I
Well,
don't get to that point of despair that I can't climb out from.
there's a structure for that a little bit. I'll just
Great,
mention it
please.
because it's a sequence. It's a learning sort of a Buddhist learning cycle that I like and apply it loosely or frequently. And one is just appreciating what is right now,
Hmm.
right this moment, and then what's the challenge that just makes you so, what is, let's drop into that. What do you despair over right now? And these are open sentences that we put in chat or say out loud. Everybody
Yeah.
complete them. Third one is what do I hope can happen for us?
Mm.
And there you got to make a transition out of the despair into what do I hope? And
Yeah.
then out of that hope can happen. Maybe you get a troika consult or some support
Hmm.
for it and you figure out what you're going to do. Then the cycle goes back to can you appreciate? What are you despairing over? What do you hope for? What are you going to
Hmm.
do? And that cycle, if you can repeat that cycle frequently, even in
Yeah.
short, if you can do that cycle like 3 times in an hour, you're working your way slowly out of the despair,
Yeah.
or you're working from hope to action. You're working on the transition between those 3 states of being or mind. I'm not sure what to call it, but that's
Yeah.
three. There's a transition there, and sometimes it's like whoosh, and sometimes it's like
Yeah. Yeah.
mm, mm.
Hmm.
Seems like we're, yeah. So
the really
Thanks
useful
for, I
part of
appreciate you digging. I appreciate you
thank
digging into the
you.
wicked question.
Yes,
That's
yeah,
great.
it's an important one, and they're
Yeah,
all important. And I think the really useful piece of this for me is, again, going back to choices. It's really different and hard to go, we'll make a new choice. And it's
yeah,
like from scratch. If I've not, what? I didn't even know I was making a choice in the first place, but you've given people, you've made it multiple choice. You know, you're saying here's tools that already exist that have been practiced and have been used and have made a difference in people's life and have been the new choice. And so I'm encouraged that even if people are not, don't run a company or teach a class or, are in any kind of role where they're convening others in that way, like these are still relevant and expansive enough that they get applied in many, many different ways. So I am also aware of the time and feeling like we could chat on and on. And I think this feels like probably the start of a longer conversation where we continue to learn from each other, because I really value what you and Henry have brought with the liberating structures.
thank you. That's sweet.
As we're wrapping up, I'm wondering if I can just broadly say
Yeah.
what else, because I want to name it myself too. I'm feeling like, and I know I gave up some of my question asking time for us to go through the wicked questions, and I'm glad we did. But I'm like, oh, there's so much more I feel like I could ask. And so rather than choosing any of those one questions, I wonder if I could put the burden on you to say, and no wrong answers here, what else, what do you want to leave people with as we're kind of wrapping up this episode, if not the
Uh,
conversation, at least this episode?
yeah. So uh, a thing that I say about liberating structures is, sure, they work in practice. What about theory?
Mm-hmm.
Right? And usually that results in a lot of people don't care about theory. And slowly but surely, I'm bringing more theory into the
Yeah,
practice. Uh, but the way that your community and your work does that is so elegant and
thank
beautiful
you.
that I guess it's an invitation to you and others in the community uh, to work with our community on how, because we're just very practical. Most of the stuff is
Yeah,
about how do you do that
yeah,
exactly. Like, let's look at that structure,
yeah,
and we could do more with theory. And there are plenty of scholars in our community who do that work. But a lot of them really weren't cut in the communication or scholarly
yeah.
sociological cloth. There are some. Arvind Singhal is one. There's some, but I think the overlap of the community is underdeveloped,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I guess leaving with that possibility that there's some ongoing work together. And the hunch is not complete. Like, for example, I'm trying to prototype measurement approaches that put in the hands of participants a developmental evaluation. So, is this way we're communicating, is it developing deeper relationships? And
Mm-hmm.
is it generating new options? And is the map or the context for us taking action, is that getting clearer? And that's a developmental evaluation that every participant can engage in. And the shortest version takes 5 minutes, 3 minutes,
Mm-hmm.
1 minute,
Yeah, yeah.
but can be done at deeper levels if you wanted to. And so that's a thing that I'm prototyping. And at least I've started prototyping in graduate programs where people
Mm-hmm.
are trying to finish their dissertation and there's challenges with finishing. And can you create a community of the faculty and students who are doing the work together? And things like that, where there's room for scholarly participation
Mm.
in between the liberating structures community and your community. So that's what I
Yeah.
think I'd like to leave with.
Yes. Yeah, it takes me back to this language that I've really been thinking about lately, and everywhere I've researched says, Chinese proverb is the attribution. I'm sure there's somewhere more specific I could find out there, but the idea of, let me see if make sure I get this right. Theory without practice is foolish.
Uh,
Practice without theory is dangerous. Maybe it's the other way around, honestly. I forget, but the sentiment of like, you need
uh,
both.
yeah.
And that's its own wicked question in its way. How are we deep in the theory and deep in the practice? And so I appreciate you saying that, because I think my community is probably coming from the other extreme of like, you name, there is this really grounded theoretical side of things. And then the ongoing journey for us is, what does the practice look like? And how do you name it
Yeah.
and make it accessible? And the communication version of that is like, a lot of people will talk about communication skills. I already know, active listening and eye contact and body, these kind of surface level things, but there's a deeper communication perspective that I think has so much to offer if people could ground, like you've already named, like if you were going to look at what's actually going on in the liberating structures through
Mhm.
the lens of a communication perspective, I think it could reveal a lot that people are already experiencing, but maybe just not naming in that way in terms of what's being made here,
Mhm.
and we're coordinating here and we're creating coherent, I'm throwing in all my CMM buzzwords right now, but I agree that I think there's more to learn here. So I'm glad that you are feeling that as well.
Yeah. Great. Great.
Well, thank you so much, Keith. I really have appreciated your stories and your time, and what I hope will continue to be an ongoing relationship and conversation.
Yeah. My pleasure. Thank you. Enjoyed every second.
Okay, that is all for today's episode. But remember, the conversation doesn't stop just because the episode does. There are so many ways to stay in dialogue. You can email questions, reflections, ideas, and stories to storieslived.storietold@gmail.com for a chance to be featured in an episode. You can comment on our Instagram at Stories Lived, Stories Told Pod, or the CMM Institute YouTube page to engage with other listeners. And you can subscribe to the CMM Institute Substack to make sure you're getting every episode right in your inbox. Links to all these places can be found in the show notes for this episode. Other ways you can support this podcast are by following, rating, and reviewing the show wherever you listen. Plus, please share this episode with someone you want to invite into the conversation. Stories Lived, Stories Told is an initiative of the CMM Institute for Personal and Social Evolution, an organization dedicated to furthering the coordinated management of meaning theory and practice of communication. More information about CMM can be found at cmminstitute.substack.com. Thank you for showing up. Thank you for being curious, and thank you for being a part of this story. I'm Abbie, and this has been Stories Lived, Stories Told.